We're back. I think I'm like just kind of like excited that we've been making it through these 2 days without any kind of entire in, full, oh, except for this moment where I can no longer talk. Oh no! Okay, before I introduce our next speaker, we do have another giveaway from Develop. They're going to be giving away an entire preset pack, which is dope. So yeah, that'll be the winner of that will receive an email telling them that they're a winner. I also think we should just send an email out to everybody telling them a winner. You know? Uh, right. Dang. All right. Jide has a habit of piquing the interest of icons and A-list celebrities through his captivating eye. Jide is an international renowned photographer with over 10 years experience shooting multicultural weddings, documentary, and editorial campaigns. Jide has put together a talk for us that highlights the importance of using body language to communicate in our photos. In his talk, he will be presenting techniques and a framework on how we can implement this approach for ourselves. His talk is entitled L.E.M's Bringing More Life to Your Photos. Jide, the virtual stage is now yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen, and as I do that, I'm going to just send my appreciation to you guys for hang on, things are just kind of doing their own thing. Here we go. So yeah, I just want to say thanks a lot for all you guys have done. I've been following essentially all the talks and all the different sort of things, and it's been so amazing. I've also been learning so much. Anyway, let's get to it. Once I can get my presentation to work. There we go. For some reason, everything's just slow now. Oops, wrong screen. Swap these things around. Here we go. All right, so we're talking about L.E.Ms, right? When it wakes up.
I have to hop in. It appears like you're sharing the wrong screen with us. We're just seeing black.
Do you see anything right now?
Now. Okay, we're back on the right path. Continue forward.
Right. During this pandemic, I've been having some technical issues, and there's no Apple Store open to fix them. So hopefully this is not going to slow us down. All right. Anyway, let's get to it. All right. So L.E.Ms, right? So basically, I read some research that said that communication, 7% of communication is verbal, 93% of that is nonverbal. And more specifically, 55% of that nonverbal communication is body language, 38 tones. We as photographers are communicators, and we photograph moments, we photograph portraits, we photograph things. If you think about it, that 55% is so important. So I feel like you need to put a lot of attention to body language when you are trying to capture, moments, stories, and things like that. So essentially, this is what we're going to be talking about today. My own approach to capturing the moments that I capture and how we do so. So let's start tackling this whole idea of what makes a successful photo, what makes a great photo. I put them into 4 different categories. The first one is light and shade. You need to consider that, obviously. You also need to consider the shade and the lines in your photograph. Color also is a really strong consideration if you're shooting in color. If you're shooting in black and white, maybe light tones, but that's the same thing as light and shade. And the last thing is gesture, which I've coined into this acronym called L.E.Ms, right? And gesture essentially is the story that you are trying to convey in the moments that you're capturing. So what are L.E.Ms? L.E.Ms simply are limbs, eyes, and mouth. And essentially what you are really doing when you are telling stories is you are capturing the limbs, the eyes, the mouth, and telling a story of what the limbs, the eyes, the mouths are doing. You have to treat each component very, very separately, and you have to treat them like very different personalities. So essentially, the eyes themselves tell their own stories. They're their own person. The limbs are another story, has its own person, and the mouth is another one. And each person or each personality of that character has to be sort of considered. Now, another thing that also needs to be very, very, very much considered as well is you have to approach capturing a story from the context of the fact that things are uncertain. You have to have a very open mind to the fact that you aren't too sure where things are going to happen. So you have to put a lot of consideration into that. You can't be rigid. You can't limit yourself in that regard, right? So this is how we start. We first of all find this composition that we want to capture, and then we do so in considering the L.E.Ms. And what I mean by that is you don't just sort of position yourself and say, okay, fine, I've got the hands, the legs, and everything, and the mouth and everything all in position. But you also got to consider where they're going to move and all that kind of stuff, right? So you consider that in composition. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to start shooting the moment, and you keep on shooting that scene, you keep on shooting that sequence till you get what you want. But you're focusing on this main thing, which is intent. So you're not just capturing a moment, but you're capturing the intent of the moment. Once you have all those things considered, you are right. So let me explain what I mean by the intent. This is a very clear moment of a bride getting her hair done with her bridesmaid in the background. It's not very clear, the bridesmaid, but you can tell she's getting her hair done. You could even argue and say, well, the hands are doing stuff. She's kind of looking a bit bored while she's doing so. But here, there's a bit more intent. Because now it's not even just about the fact she's putting her hair together, but she's also telling you, or this moment is telling you about her struggles, right? Anyone who sees this can see what the eyes are doing, what the mouth is doing, and then also how she's fluffing her hair. There's so much more energy and vibrancy in what we're seeing. So I'm going to show you now a little video, which is just a time lapse of photographs that I've taken whilst the bride is preparing to get into her car. And of course, the story is her getting into a car before she goes and gets married. But what I'm looking for here is intent. And I'm looking at her L.E.Ms, right? So I'm considering what her eyes are doing, what her mouth is doing, what her limbs are doing. And it's not just her, but every single character in this particular scene. I'm playing around with different compositions, one to kind of tell the story of location, which I'm not sure if it's working, and I come into another sort of change of composition, I get in even closer, but I'm still not getting the intent of what I want. I keep clicking and keep clicking, I keep talking to her, another character comes into the scene. Now I have more L.E.Ms to look out for, and I'm now taking more shots, and now I see something happening. They blow a kiss towards each other, which I think is amazing. But I don't stop there. I keep shooting. And the point of shooting is you've got to be committed. Because guess what? Look at what's happening now. Something amazing. Oh my goodness. There you go. Then she now takes a photograph. But then I'm like, another person's coming into the frame. Oh my gosh, more L.E.Ms to consider. But anyway, we stick to the... oops, come on, go to the next frame. Hang on a second. There we go. We capture the moment in the sense that now we have a stronger story we had a stronger story that really told you something about what was going on. Sorry, for some weird reason my computer is lagging, but I'll just go on without it anyway. This is another situation where you can almost see intent in the feeding of the groom whilst the cake is being cut, but even stronger by this rejection that he shows towards the bride, more so by the way he's expressing his eyes. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is, again, just to show you this whole idea of being committed to the scene. Right, let me show you another video of me working, but then here kind of showing how I position myself. As I said, you consider the L.E.Ms in an attempt to capture the intent of what you're trying to tell, the story you're trying to tell. So I find a location, a viewport that I prefer, which is quite from above. And I'm considering the L.E.Ms here. And I notice the bridesmaid runs over and does something quite interesting. I run over and try and get pos- position myself. And when the next frame comes up, you will see that the intent of the image is expressed in how the LEMs are shown, right? So the next one, again, is what you will do when things are static. The first thing I notice is, oh goodness. Anyway, whilst this is going on and when it finds itself, what I actually do is I position the camera in a position that shows the LEMs in a way that actually captures the moment itself. Some weird reason this thing is, there we go. And then capturing that particular moment in itself, you can actually get the full story of what's happening. All right, so the next frame, sorry, for some reason everything is kind of, computers are not sort of working out, and I do apologize. Here we're sort of, we first notice the hands on the dress sort of as she's holding it up, but we also can't help but notice her expression, right? And therefore even begs the question when we now notice the contrasting expression of the bridesmaid. More so even when we look at this lady over here and the auntie who has a very, very contrasting expression, more so again when you look at her wagging her finger. And this just really gives you a fuller perspective of her wearing her dress, bridesmaid smiling, auntie wagging a finger and telling her, you cannot cry at this time, this is your wedding day. You know, it just really brings a lot more energy into the frame. And when you're sort of making your compositions, you have to consider where all these different LEMs are going to sort of present themselves, because they really fully tell the story. So I'll give you another example. Here is a bride who is on the dance floor being showered with a lot of money by all these people around her, and you can almost feel the expression. But the expression is furthermore exemplified when you look at her arm. The arm itself tells you exactly what she is, how she feels. This is another one that you could even argue and say, well, this is a complete story. It's really obvious what's happening here. Grandma is standing up, kissing the daughter as she walks down the aisle, and you can see the expression of the bride in this regard. But what you're missing here, which kind of really tells the whole story, because grandma can't really walk, is the support that the bride's brother puts when he brings his arm holding grandma into this frame. Here, a very, very similar situation where the groom, awaiting his bride, when he first sees his bride, is very much taken aback by the beauty that is bestowed on him because of how, of her presence. But, this is a moment that we generally see most of the times, but there is a lot more strength in it when you see the example shown by the best man extending his arm to really show his support and care for the groom. And it's something that can't go amiss. The story itself is about the bride coming through, but also more so about the best man himself. And these are the sort of things that LEMs tell you. Again, another really classic shot that we all go for, which is the first kiss. We can almost say, yeah, this is great because we can see the cradling and the cradling of the face and the supporting on the elbows. But then there's so much more in the background when you also think about everything else that is happening there, and you tell that story just by being committed to the scene and looking at the way, again, LEMs just emphasizing the full story. And finally, during the sort of search for the garter underneath, when the groom goes underneath the bride's dress, the intent itself is very much exemplified when you consider his leg, him diving in, and just really showing you the expression of that intent too. So what are the things that, when it comes to portraits, and now that we're kind of making this transition, one of the things that I always do is I try and bring my understanding of LEMs into how these portraits work. Why? Because these things form lines. And remember, lines are very, very important elements that guide you into sort of making great photos. They form lines into areas that are very important. So like, for instance, now the hand sort of cradling the bride in this case, and then also just sort of leading to what's actually happening here, her expression, the poke on the nose. There's so much depth in terms of what's going on in this story. And all these are things you consider when you're posing your couples. Now, this is one of the things I find most people struggle with, posing. And I always say to them, try to consider posing from the idea of making things work, like bending different parts of the body and sort of tilting things, but also give personality and character to every single aspect of the L.E.Ms. So here I am setting up a standard pose that we go for. I call them the sort of staring competition pose. Yeah, fair enough. They're just looking at each other, not really doing very much. There isn't very much intent because you're just seeing them staring at each other. Here I try and enforce a bit more vigor by having them laugh, but they're still missing something. So I change things up and I apply the idea of, hey, why don't we have you guys play with each other? They're flicking water towards each other, and this could further be more exemplified by putting more energy into it. How? Just by bringing the hands into it. And again, as I said, the L.E.Ms kind of tell you the full story of their playfulness towards each other. Extending that too, you can also do a bit more in terms of telling more stories, having them carry each other, and then just the story itself just has more strength just because of the way their limbs just are expressing themselves. So really quickly, here's another example. Almost done, by the way. Whoops. Oh no. It's almost as if every time I come to a video, my Mac decides it's not working. Anyway, so here we go. The same sort of idea of a walk pose where couples kind of, you have them come together and do different things in that regard. Here I'm using the same idea where I have a bride sort of against the wall, sort of pose her in that regard with the light. This isn't working. Almost there. There we go. And then you can kind of form different triangles with the different aspects of different things that are, happening in that regard. And I use the same philosophies and the same sort of idea in terms of posing. Whenever I pose people, I try and create triangles and I try and use the limbs to sort of complete these triangles to, tell you a deeper story. All right, and then I think we are on our penultimate slide. Here we go. Same thing here. You can almost get a sense of what's actually happening just by playing around with limbs and sort of creating the same thing. All right, so just to recap, consider the L.E.Ms as personalities, which is the limbs, the mouth, the eyes, the mouth, how you can use them to do different things. Expect that anything can happen, just like my presentation is kind of going a bit funny. And then don't limit yourself. You've got to remember that there's always a lot more to what you're seeing, just like the situation where I had the bride coming into the car and then the bridesmaid came into the frame and sort of pulled back in that regard. You have to be committed. You've got to keep shooting till you find what it is that you're after. Get close for impact, but also consider the L.E.Ms. I remember yesterday one of the speakers mentioned this phrase by Dale Allen Harvey, which I absolutely love. It's called shoot what it feels like, not so much what it looks like. It's the same thing you got to bring into your L.E.Ms. So thank you so much. I'm so sorry about the hiccups that my little presentation has had over here. But if you'd like to find out a bit more about the things that I do, please go onto my website. I also have a really, really lovely street photography website there at the bottom, which is jidealakija.com. And of course, please support me on Patreon if you also want to learn a bit more about some of the things that I'm doing. Thanks a lot, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got a couple of questions.
Okay, cool.
First question is, when giving the image to your clients, do you make a special album for your black and white images, or are they mixed in with the rest?
When it comes to giving it with the clients, I have black and color mixed in, but not. I won't sort of have the black and whites and color on the same pages, if that makes sense. I'll have them on different pages, so I have a group of color and a group of black and whites on different pages.
Nice. Other question. When shooting through the moment, are you motor driving or just constant snapping as you anticipate what may happen next?
Am I what? Sorry.
They're saying motor driving, so like maybe like
Oh,
is
I
it,
see. Sort of
yeah.
just like no, I'm clicking each scene as I think I see something, and I click. Sometimes I click a bit quicker than others. I click twice, usually because I shake a lot whenever I'm clicking. Sometimes I'm never really sure, so I double click. And it's essentially sometimes you see something and your heart just kind of pumps in, and you're like, oh, I want to catch that, and you click, click, click in that regard. But no, I do not use sort of burst mode, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Another question is, do you have any tips or advice on like how to stay aware of your surroundings so you having that appropriate reaction time to get those shots like that you might be missing? Like the example of uh, the bridesmaid going over and dancing.
So I guess if I understand your question, how do I sort of anticipate better and make sure I'm in the right position when things are happening? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my own way is I work. Okay, so I do this thing where when I work into a room, I work in zones. So I have different areas where I'm going to take photographs, and I keep working around those zones. So if I notice something is happening in one particular zone, I'm constantly aware of what's happening in other areas. So if something happens there, I already know what settings I need to have before I get there. So by the time I'm there, I know exactly where I'm going to be. But I'm always constantly looking at where the limbs are and what the eyes and sort of mouth is doing at each time for each person.
Nice. And last question, which might be from your biggest fan. Are you just a legend or just legendary?
Oh wow, that's such a humbling question. I'll leave it to them to decide on that one. Well, thank you so much for that. I will just say that I just take each opportunity as it comes, and I don't think anything I know today is all being because of me, but more so because of. They always say you're only as good as the shoulders of the giants that you stood on. So I've had some really, really good mentors who've guided me with everything. So I think that'll be my answer to that.
Nice. That's the appropriate answer. Stay humble. Stay humble. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
so much for making the time and for giving the talk and yeah, and like supporting us and helping to get the word out and yeah, really appreciate it.
No worries at all. And just a few apologies about the hiccups on this thing. I was hoping things would work out here, but for some reason, my issues have sort of transpired through
Nah,
this.
don't worry about it. They were minor and they weren't really taken away from what you were saying. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Okay. We got one speaker left. Out of a
Kind of sad.
I, I think Daniel, we should do it tomorrow. I think you should
Just
make it happen. If anybody's to make a virtual conference happen on one day's notice, it's you. And I feel like now we're hitting the groove. We could just keep this going and turn it into like one of those like 42-week like performance art pieces,
sleeping tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah, good call. So we have one last giveaway. This is appropriate. A premium content bundle from SLR Lounge worth $2,000. This is very appropriate because our last speaker is Pi Jararsa, who's one of the people behind SLR Lounge. Also, his talks appropriately entitled "How to Close."
That wasn't even on purpose.
You didn't
It was
even.
scheduled before I knew the topic.
Sometimes you just get good bounces, and sometimes you step on the cord and break the internet, and you just got to keep rolling. You just got to keep rolling. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna wait. No, I'm not even. No, hold on. There's a break. We're going on a break, and then I'll introduce our speaker.
Why we take so many breaks? Switch.
Sure, I'll explain that. So we take the breaks in between. Because it's really important for our mental health. No, it's so Adrian can remove. Yeah, Adrian has to urinate. No, it's so Adrian can remove the one speaker and call the other speaker, and we can get them plugged in and everything lined up. And okay, we're gonna go on a break now. Okay.